Good morning, everybody. We're going to give it about 2 minutes just to give time for everybody to be able to get into today's webinar, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to give it about 1 more minute, and then we'll get started here. All right. Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Navigating the Charity Landscape. I am Jenny Tukeski, the Programming and Communications Manager here for Better Business Bureau Midwest Plains. Just wanted to let you know we will be recording today's webinar, and within 24 hours, I will be sending out a follow-up email to you with a link to the webinar as well as the presentation information and our contact information as well. So with that, this morning, we have the privilege of having Jim Judge of the Better Business Bureau joining us. Jim has been with the Bureau for several years, as he states, decades, and we are very honored to have him with us. Today, he will be discussing the different charity landscapes, BBB standards of charitable accountability, and more. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A section, and we will answer those questions throughout the presentation today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Jim, welcome. Thank you so much for being here this morning, and it is all yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you having me out, and we'll go over some of this information about the charity side of things. I know a lot of people know of Better Business Bureau strictly based on the business side, and it's a place where you go to file complaints, but that's only part of what we do. So Jenny, I go ahead and hit share on my side then
Yes.
on the PowerPoint. Here we go. Not working. Not sure why that's. Hold on a second. Share screen. Here we go.
There you go.
Popping up.
Yes.
All right. All right. So basically what we'll do is just kind of go over a little bit about Better Business Bureau and the charity information service that we have, what we do, how we look at charities, how we do the evaluations, and basically an overview of the whole process. I'll start with a little bit of a background on everything. So Better Business Bureaus we're throughout the country. We're in Canada. We are a 501c6. So we're not a charity like what we're looking at when we do these evaluations. Typically, we're looking at 501c3 public charities that are asking the public for money. BBBs, on the other hand, are a C6. It's more like kind of like the same thing as like a Chamber of Commerce type designation. BBBs are operated and supported by local businesses. And the idea is that we are able to put information together to help people make decisions, whether it's to hire a roofer, get your car worked on, donate to a charity, all of that good stuff. Better Business Bureaus do process complaints. I know that's kind of what we're mostly known for. We do have mediation and arbitration services available also. But most of the people that contact BBB are contacting us to do some research first. And whether it's a Google search or specifically coming to bbb.org or give.org to check out a company or charity before they do business. I would suggest if you're not using the resource, if you're on here for charity information and you're not using the BBB as a resource for the rest of your life, you should be. particularly when you're making large purchases, when you're spending big dollars. We get a lot of complaints in the construction field, auto repair, car sales, stuff that's pretty consistent. You're always going to need it, and you're usually higher dollar volume. So make sure you do your research, do your vetting before you do. And that's my spiel on that side. So now we'll kick to the charity stuff. The Better Business Bureau has, I can't give you the exact number. We're in like 90 something BBBs throughout the country and in Canada. I mentioned some of the services that we provide. What I'm going to concentrate on, though, is the local charity information service. And this is the evaluation process that we use for accrediting charities. It is based off what we do on a national level through the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. BBB Wise Giving Alliance looks at charities that are much larger than what we look at locally. Occasionally, we'll have a local charity that's really big, but that only kind of concentrates on their solicitations locally. In those instances, we would do the evaluation, but most of the time, the larger local agencies tend to be more national in fundraising scope. And if that's the case, then that is the purview of our national office. So we're the boots on the ground locally. We're the ones that do the hand holding. If a standard is missed, we're the ones that help you meet the standards, give you templates, examples, all that good stuff. The BBB Wise Giving Alliance was created roughly over 20 years ago. It was a merger of an entity called the National Charities Information Bureau and the BBB Philanthropic Advisory Service. That's more than you ever want to know, but combined, we're looking at hundreds of years of experience in evaluating charities. This entity that was created, the BBB Wise Giving Alliance, has been involved in this arena for a very, very long time. And I think you'll see when we look at our standards that they are very comprehensive, but they're not unattainable. These are best practices that everybody can meet. And with the exception of an audit, and that is all depending on how much money the organization brings in, with the exception of that, all of this is really, there's no cost to it. Maybe some time, elbow grease, that kind of thing. So I really am proud of the fact that these standards are attainable for most organizations. I can tell you anecdotally, I have accredited organizations that were smaller than $5,000. I've also accredited organizations that have hundreds of millions of dollars. So I know sometimes it's like, oh, how can you, compare apples to oranges? When we start going through these best practices, I think you'll understand. Evaluation process. So let me jump back a little bit. Locally, I kind of touched on that, but locally, what we do is we're looking at the local organizations that are getting inquiries into our database. So if people are asking about you, then we're going to ask you to respond and allow us to put a report together. The evaluation process itself, once we get a donor reaching out to us, we have a letters process we follow. The letters process, we send a total of 3 letters and give about a month and a half to 2 months to respond. And we are extremely flexible on time if more time is needed. I've heard every excuse, if you want to call them that, under the sun. I've probably used them all myself also. But we're very flexible with this. We really understand how turnover can affect, especially in development, the entire operation of everything. It kind of just shuts everything down when it's when things aren't firing on all cylinders. So it's something just to let you know, we're not everything's just black and white. We definitely have gray area that we operate in, and as long as it's understood and a reasonable explanation as to why something is the way it is, then we can usually work with you. Once you submit the information, we have a print questionnaire that we send you. We have an online version, but I don't know. It's not as good as the print version. I know we started years ago, like Jenny had mentioned, over 20 years ago, I think, a couple decades. We started with the print questionnaire, and then we moved to an online system, and then a better online system, and then a better online system. And it just got to a point where people started asking me for the print version again. I started sharing it, and I was getting it back faster than anything else. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to switch everybody to this print one. Let's do it. So we have a print version that is much easier. It's quick. You get every question you're going to be asked right in front of you, all in one easy way to consume it. You don't have to go to the next screen, the next screen, the next screen. So I really like the way that this is set up. We have it done here. Most charities, if you're pretty well organized, knock it out in half an hour, sometimes less. If you're unorganized, it can take longer because we do ask for information like board meeting attendance, financial statements, 990s, all that good stuff. So the evaluation process, once we do a draft, we send it to you. It's not made public. We send the draft to you and let you basically let us know, what do you want us to work on with you? Is something missing? Do you need an annual report template? Do you need a CEO performance review policy template? Or is it something more like, well, we don't have a treasurer right now, we're looking for one because ours resigned? These are all things that you can come to us with and say, hey, we need help. If you do, we will do our best to assist you and give you whatever we can to help. So I'll go into a little bit about the standards. I already touched on the overview, kind of the disclosure process. We have, you fill out the questionnaire, it comes to us, we send it back to you with the draft, and then at that point we work on it. Time frame, as long as we're working to meet the standard, I don't usually crack down real hard unless it's something that's glaring and or a problem situation, and then we may need to move it along a little bit more. Most of the time, it's going to depend on how responsive the organization is. As long as things are moving in the right direction, I'm usually I'm not going to harass you. So the standards for charity accountability, I'll spend most of the time on these, but I'm not going to dig into any one too quick or too deep, because I think everybody will get bored. But we wanted to have this on here to show people how this is an extremely holistic view of a charity. This isn't just, hey, here's your 990, you get, you got 90%. It is, we want people to make decisions on giving based on things more than just the numbers, more than just the financial percentages and all of that. The two questions I get the most whenever I get calls from donors or I get calls from reporters is how much money goes to the charity, which usually I typically mean how much money goes to programs. And the other question is, how much does the CEO make? And then they always want to answer, they always want like a gotcha, like, oh, do you think that's enough money? Or do you think that's too much money? And my response on both of them is, it depends. Again, there's a lot of gray area. Usually with a chief executive, within reason, you get what you pay for. And I've watched over the years that is true. You do typically get what you pay for. I've seen situations where you've paid way too much for somebody not good, and I've seen the reverse a ton. So there is gray area. You kind of got to just work with it case by case. I'll touch on the each of the standards, kind of each of the sections a little bit, maybe spotlight a couple of the main focuses, but you can really see we're looking at the governance of the organization. So the idea being your board is volunteer. The board is supposed to represent the public. There's a reason for there's a tax exempt status. The board is representative of the public because the public is the one that is basically supporting. So we make sure that there's not any kind of conflicts of interest. We look at that the chief executive is being reviewed, that fundraising contracts are being reviewed, budgets approved, 990 signed off on, conflict of interest policy, you name it. So we look at a lot of stuff to make sure that the board is actually involved. We want to make sure that the board has at least 5 voting members. It's not usually a problem, but sometimes with smaller startups it is. We look to make sure you do have a chair, that you do have a treasurer. And then we look to make sure that there's evenly spaced meetings and that the majority of attendance or the majority of the board attends. And then we also looked at that not too many people are compensated. You can only have 1 or 10% of the board compensated. So if you have 20 people on the board, 2 people can be compensated. Then this is where it gets a little confusing about compensation, direct compensation, indirect compensation. If let's say the wife is the board chair and the husband is the executive director, and they both serve as voting members of the board, that would be 2, because even though the husband, even though the wife is the board chair, is not technically paid, that relationship is an indirect compensation relationship. Now, how far out do we go in family, lineage? It's really just immediate family. It starts getting into that gray area we talked about before, but we're reasonable about it. So idea being, you don't want too much power in anybody's control. We see this sometimes with families. You'll have all these people from the same family on the board and they control everything. Well, that's not independent oversight. So there's other ways you can set up entities to operate that way if you want to, but it's not a 501c3 public charity. Anyway, and then the other thing we look at, I mentioned conflicts of interest. Not every related party transaction is a conflict of interest. My rule of thumb, typically, when somebody asks, what do you think about this, is what would it look like on the front page of the paper? What would it look like if everybody knew? Whether or not it's actually a conflict of interest or unethical is irrelevant, because perception is going to be key. So that's the thing you need to ask yourself. Typically, when we look through these kind of situations, if you've had multiple bids, say you're getting a roof put on and you have a roofer on your board. Well, if you had 3 bids, the roofer on your board's bid was half the price of everybody else's, and that person recused themselves from voting for the contract, probably okay. It's but you just want to make sure when you do these kind of things, you do your due diligence, because if it does come back to bite you, you have backup and you can show, hey, we're on the up and up on this. I'm going to quickly open up this chat to see. Okay, so charities listed. Best way right now, give.org. You can get on there. We're in the process of revamping actually bbb.org and give.org for charity reports, but I'd say resource for being able to pull charity reports right now, excuse me, I would go to give.org. Okay, so on to the next one, effectiveness. This one's easy. Well, not easy. Actually, this is probably the most missed standard. It's not something that we delve too, excuse me, far into. This is more of something that we want the organization to do and to figure out themselves. We have a template policy that we share, but it's very vague. It's generic on purpose, because we do look at food banks and animal protection agencies and domestic violence shelters and religious organizations. So they're all different. But the idea is that the organization looks at themselves, measures how effective they are in achieving their mission, and then shares those results with the board. This is how the organization gets better every year. Whether it's a strategic plan or whatever, organization may have had a strategic plan in place and doing something like this for years and years and years. But what we want, the idea, should it be a formal policy, is because what if everybody in the organization, what if something happens? What if everybody leaves? What if somebody key leaves? This is to make sure that the organization has policies in place to make sure it's going on forever. So that's the idea. Again, we have a template for this. It's very commonly missed, but it really is that basic. That this is how you go about assessing your performance and effectiveness is another story. I've got tons of resources there as well, but it is something more that we want you to create as opposed to us do for you. The finances section, this, as I mentioned before, really is the only one that has any kind of cost involved, and we would look only for an audit. We look for a full audit if the organization is over $1 million in revenue. Between 250,000 and 1 million. Actually, I believe they moved the threshold to 500,000. 500 to 1 million, a review, and then under that 500,000, just internally produced statements are fine. So the only thing, the in between the review and the audit would be something that would be a cost, but it is dependent on how much revenue the organization is bringing in. Some of the other things, and it's one of those, we don't want donors to concentrate on finances, but it's always going to be asked, and no matter what anybody says, this is going to be the first thing that donors look at to make a giving decision. So we have to have this in here, even though we are very upfront and have been very vocal internationally, even, that you cannot judge a charity's effectiveness based strictly on program percentages. We've been big into the overhead myth, trying to bust that up. But the idea is, and I've seen it tons of times, where an organization may say that they spend 95% of their money on their programs, but I know darn well they don't do as much, or they're not as effective as another organization that might spend 75% of the money on it. So just that alone isn't an indicator alone. You got to use a couple key points. Finances can be one thing to look at, but at the same time, look and see what the results are, see what the numbers look like. We make sure that they're not spending too much money to raise money. So roughly the rule of thumb is about 35 cents to raise $1. With that being said, extenuating circumstances do occur. Some types of missions are more controversial than others, depending on where you're at in the country. So what I deal with in LA is going to be totally different than what I deal with in the Midwest and what I deal with in New York City. So we take it again by a situational or case by case basis. But a lot of times this isn't a standard that anybody has any problems with. There are times startups will have problems because obviously donor acquisition is expensive, and we do take that into account. Some of the other things, joint cost allocation, I'll just throw in there. It's not something we see a lot on local organizations, but if you do allocate some, if you do fundraising pieces that have a program side to them and you allocate some of the expense to fundraising and some of the expense to programs, just make sure you're clear with it, because that is usually a red flag that's going to flag in our system. And then last but not least is just a budget. We make sure that the budget is approved by the board. And we really are looking only for three main things in that budget: the total projected program expenses, admin expenses, and fundraising expenses. Those three. We don't want a 25-page budget because it's confusing, and that's what's going to confuse your board as well. The idea would be you want a summary so the board can look at the audit, they can look at the 990, and they can look at that budget and say, yeah, we're gaining a program, so that's why expenses are going up. Or we're going to do this, this is why this. So just to make the budget more understandable, obviously giving them 3 line items of just those 3 expenses probably wouldn't be as useful, but you get the idea. Moving on to fundraising and informational materials. So Better Business Bureau was founded years and years ago. The whole idea was reviewing advertising and going after what they called snake oil salesmen. So people that would come into town, rip everybody off, and leave. BBB started what was known as vigilance committees back then, and that's probably a more nice way of putting it. But basically, these were business owners that got together and went after these individuals that were coming in and ripping off everybody. The reality is they come in and rip everybody off. Nobody can buy stuff anymore because they don't have any money. So they got to really going after these individuals. They started doing ads in newspapers and just really running them out of town. And it just kind of grew from there. So this aspect of what we do on the charity side is very pure for BBB. We do look at the solicitations you have. So how are you asking for money, direct mail pieces? We look to make sure that they're truthful and not misleading. Now, I'm not going to go through and dog you. Can you please prove this one of every 3 claim? Because that gets extremely difficult. If something is way out there, if you say 100% of your money goes to programs, we're going to have to ask. If you make superlative claims that are really far, you're going to get asked about that. It's like any puffery. We do it with our business, accredited businesses too. If a car dealership claims that they can save you 100% on whatever, we're going to have them ask and have them prove it. It's just the nature of what we do. So we look at solicitation materials. We look at your website, make sure you have a good privacy policy, that it has everything we need. We look to make sure you have your financial information on your website. So your most recent 990. And then probably one of the more standard 17 with the 990 on the website is probably one of the more commonly missed. And then standard 16, which has to do with the annual report, is pretty commonly missed as well. We do have a template we share. It's a one-sided Word document that is straight to the point. It's mission, program accomplishments, financial snapshot, and board roster. That's all you need to meet the standard. And I know some organizations don't do them anymore and have come back to doing them and realize that it's a great donor retention piece. People that you are able to educate and keep informed about the organization are going to be more likely to keep supporting you over the years. So having an annual report, if it's the one way you touch out to every donor, just saying, hey, here's a quick little piece on what we did last year. Maybe a little bit about what plans we have for next year. And I've seen them with even return envelopes included. So be creative. There's a lot of ways to go about it. So that's basically our 20 standards. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions on the 20 standards themselves? Here we go. At this point, so here the question that we have is, can a consumer, can you file a complaint or leave a review on a charity like they can a business? So we are going to be moving our data, charity data at some point, and that is something we are discussing. You can file a complaint, definitely. Standard 20 actually encompasses whether you respond to complaints or not. We don't get a lot of complaints on charities. It's typically and it used to be with telemarketers back in the day when they actually physically had people calling and that kind of thing. That's not really the case anymore. If we get complaints about charities, usually it's because their elderly relative is getting inundated with tons of junk mail. And I'll suggest if you have an elderly relative that gets tons of junk mail, you better take a close look at it, because if you've given to one of the bad guys, they usually sell your name to everybody else. So anyway, you can file a complaint. We process them the same as we do on the business side. I do know probably we don't accept more complaints on charities than we do on businesses, because we can't go to a charity. If you file a complaint and say, hey, I need money to pay my utilities bill, and they said, no, you don't qualify. Well, you complained to us. We can't take that. It's their policy. We can't tell them that well, I'm sorry, you make too much money, you can't do this. That's not our call. So there's some things that are out of our purview, that gray area again, but for the most part, you can. Reviews, something I would love to have, and I am very gung-ho about pushing that. So if I can, I will be hoping that happens. Reviews, that is. All right. So why Better Business Bureau? It's a good question. There's other entities out there. Charity Navigator, GuideStar is another one. There's various other smaller entities as well. I think Charity Watch out of Chicago. I guess the question that you get to is sometimes you have to step outside of the nonprofit bubble. And I do this a lot, stepping out and kind of trying to look from the eyes of a charity. Does the average donor know what any of these are? I mean, most average donors, most people walking down the street know what BBB is, know what that signals, what the torch logo means. And if you're accredited charity, they mean that probably means a good thing. It's not necessarily the case with other entities. And yes, while they may be known within our bubble and within the industry, I think maybe asking a question of somebody that's not in the industry might surprise you. And these are the people that you got to reach out to. The average donor is what keeps everybody going. So why us? Studies have shown the accreditation, there is a correlation between the accreditation and increased fundraising revenue. 13.5%, I believe, is the number in a study that we had through Baruch College. Better search engine optimization, obviously trust. It's you're going over best practices and then meeting them. It's full transparency. You're letting everybody look at everything. So I that itself is a great thing. We did a survey locally in one of our markets, and we're asking, how important is trust to your charity? And it's the most important thing that you have. It is your lifeblood. If you lose your trust, you lose the organization. And I've seen this with name changes. Over the past probably 4 years, we've had a lot of changes in names based on some historical figures that maybe had some unsavory things that they did or supported or whatever it was. Seeing a lot of changes there, and the trust has to be there. So what are you doing to make sure that you're proving that you are a trustworthy entity? Some of the benefits over the other third-party evaluators, I already alluded to. One is market recognition, but I really do feel like having a third party take a look at all of your stuff, and give you a pat on the back or not, or say, hey, this is what's deficient, this could be better, this could be worse. I don't see how that is ever a bad thing. I have tons of organizations that include our report in grant applications, that use it as a way. In some of the markets, it's even requirement to get grant funding. In some markets, it's even required to get United Way funding. So it all depends on the market. But I think this accreditation can be utilized and leveraged by your organization to help you in a variety of ways. And then you get the seal. It's a trust mark. It's a way for people to see exactly that you've jumped through the hoops, that you're trustworthy. And the reality is, I hate to say this, most donors, they want to say, should I give it yes or no? They don't want to dig through too much. So that seal helps them be able to recognize, yes, they've jumped through all these hoops. Thankfully, I don't have to understand all of these hoops because the work's done. And there you go. So I'll open it up to any questions. I try to keep it within about a half an hour. I almost hit the mark perfectly, but oh well, I was close. My contact information is here. If you have any questions, you can hit me email locally also at charity@bbbinc.org. That's our local one. I have no less than 21 emails. So anyone you get will get to my main email address. That one works just the same as any other, but my phone number is the same as well. A bunch of numbers that funnel all of that one. I'd love to take any questions you have, answer anything that or any problems that you run into. I'd say probably the most gratifying part of the work that I do is being able to help organizations meet all of the standards and get them to a good point, and then watch how it helps. I've watched so many small organizations over the years get big and get better, and a lot of them will, if you ask them, say the direction we got from Better Business Bureau in the beginning was imperative. We had to have that. We didn't really have anywhere. We didn't know where to go. So I like that part, but with all of those, we have many others that are more difficult, but that's the work. So any questions or anything like that for me?
Jim, I have a question. In regards to once an organization becomes accredited and receives the charity seal, how often do they have to renew to keep that seal?
We update the report annually for seal holders. That coincides with the updating of, basically the seal license and everything. But we only ask for that a few documents on the update. We've streamlined the process because a charity's gone through and jumped through all these hoops. You already sent us the performance and effectiveness policy. You already sent us your CEO performance review policy. We already know you have that stuff, so I'm not going to ask for it again. What we do ask for are the things that change. So your audit, if you have one, your tax form, your 990, board roster. We ask for board meeting attendance from the last 3 board meetings, and a current annual report. Everything else I can pull from various locations on the internet. I think more and more so, trying to make it as easy as possible on the charity is the goal. I want to make it to where I think getting it down to about a half an hour is solid. That's for as comprehensive as these standards are, that it puts the work on me, but that's the idea. Is I want to make it easy for the charities. So the update stuff, almost all of the work is on my end. You just throw 4 or 5 documents in an email, shoot them back to me. I update everything, send it back to you. You sign off on it, make any updates you want, and you're good to go.
Nice. Okay. All right. If you could go to the next slide then, Jim.
Oh, sorry.
If anybody does have any further questions or thinks of anything after the webinar and stuff, remember we will be sending out that follow-up email with the link and the presentation information. Jim's information will also be in there too, that you can go ahead and send him an email or myself too. Just real quick, we just wanted to let you know about some upcoming events that we have going on here with BBB Midwest Plains. September 10th, we have another webinar, and it's the benefits of BBB accreditation. September 24th is our 27th annual Torch of Awards Ethics Luncheon. So if you are interested in coming, please go to our website, register today, and come out and celebrate all the winners with us. This year we have 35 winners for the Torch Awards, so it's pretty exciting. On September 26th, in person down in Overland Park, Kansas, we'll be having our open house for our office down there, and the ribbon cutting ceremony starts at 3 p.m. So come out and meet us all. We look forward to seeing everybody at that event. And then September 27th, also down there, we will be having a first aid training and certification course. Spots are limited, so if you are interested in that event, please get signed up today for that. And then in October, just to give a heads up to everybody, in Omaha, we will be at the National Night Out event with the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. So come out, see us, meet the police officers, the fire departments that will be out there, the state troopers that will be out there, as well as the canine unit. So we look forward to that special fun event too. If you could go to the next slide then. Again, here's my contact information. If you think of any programs that you would like to see the Bureau put on, or if you would like to have us come out and do a presentation somewhere, please contact me. I love to talk to you about those opportunities with you of what we could do and present for you as well. And then also we have a survey. You can scan the QR code today, or again, like I said, it will be in the follow-up information for you. We love to have everyone's feedback. Let us know how today's webinar was for you. And we are always striving to do better. So please let us know. Jim, a special thank you to you for giving up time today for us this morning and educating us all on the charity standards for organizations. I greatly appreciate that. And I hope that everyone today is able to walk away with some new insight on charity insights and the standards. And if you're not having the seal yet, that you are going to start filling out that application and getting one done right away. So we thank you for that. With that, I hope everyone has a wonderful Wednesday, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.